just being a part of this team and fulfilling one dream at a time, 1 year at a time, one game at a time. I don't think it can get any better than that, and I feel like I want to be there for each and every one of my guys. I'm taking full accountability and full continuity into stepping into this leadership role.
Scouts were concerned Ceedee Lamb was too skinny for the NFL.
Are there cons in his tape, and if so, what are they?
Yeah, I mean, he might not have the elite athleticism. He's probably not going to run the 4.3s. He doesn't have that exceptional deep speed, but he does still get open on the deep route tree. And then he probably could still stand to add some more muscle, fill out his frame. Only 191 pounds right now at 6'2", fairly slight build. You want to see him probably get into the 200 range to be a more complete receiver.
He walked into the 2020 Combine at 198 pounds with 11 reps on the bench, and teams used those two numbers to talk themselves into other receivers. 2 Alabama wideouts went before him, and a top 10 talent fell to pick 17, right into the Cowboys' lap.
Pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, the Dallas Cowboys select Ceedee Lamb, wide receiver, Oklahoma.
What this kid does, he can play in that slot position that was vacated by Randall Cobb. He played 70% outside last season, 30% in the slot. But he had productions from both spots. 7 touchdowns outside, 7 TDs from that slot, Mel. So he can play in the slot, and when he has to, he can go outside and make plays also.
What followed was 2 years behind Amari Cooper, a takeover once Cooper got traded, and a 2023 season that broke Michael Irvin's records and Irvin's own number.
You know, you really gotta put a lot of focus into stopping him, and you know, it's kind of like one of those games where you're like, let's let the rest of the team beat us. Let's not let this guy beat us.
Throwing it. It's open for Ceedee Lamb inside the 5. Sideline. Lamb again. Tackle. No one home. Touchdown, Dallas. By Pickens. Here's Lamb wide open. Backs in for the touchdown.
Then Dallas paid him $136 million, making him the highest paid Cowboys receiver of all time. The frame that was supposed to limit him became the engine, and he isn't done yet. But the story doesn't start in Dallas. It actually starts 4 hours southeast in Richmond, Texas. Ceedee Lamb would actually play both ways at Foster High School, lining up at wide receiver and free safety. A Louisiana native, he saw his family land in the Houston area after Hurricane Katrina, making him a kid who had to rebuild a life before he ever built a football resume. His high school senior year in 2016 was a year that made him undeniable, one that forces recruiters to drive out and see for themselves. He caught 98 passes for 2,032 yards and 33 touchdowns, averaging 20.7 yards every time he touched the ball as a receiver. Foster went on a 5A state playoff run that fall, and Lamb went off in it, including a 226-yard, 9-catch game against Dripping Springs inside the Alamo Dome. Player of the Game honors came his way more than once that postseason, and by December, the whole state knew his name. The eye test was obvious even then. He had the body control to twist in the air and come down with the ball he had no business catching, and the tracking ability to find a deep ball over his shoulder without breaking stride. The thing is, even back then, he was lean. A build that makes Texas recruiting analysts hesitate, because the state is full of burners who dominate on Friday and disappear by Saturday. Ceedee was a 4-star prospect, ranked outside the top 30 nationally at his position. Not the headline name even in his own class. His body was the part people kept quietly noting, and that note never fully went away. Then Oklahoma called, and the fit was almost too perfect. Lincoln Riley had taken over an offense that lived in space, one that spread defenses out and let playmakers work in the middle of the field in open grass, where Lamb did his best damage. He committed to Oklahoma, and the moment he stepped in Norman in 2017, he was catching passes from a conveyor belt of elite quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield ran the show his freshman year, Kyler Murray took over the keys after him, then Jalen Hurts stepped in. 3 starters, 3 totally different styles, and Lamb produced with all of them, helping Baker and Kyler win back-to-back Heismans, and Hurts finished as a finalist in 2019. Over 40 games, the numbers stacked up. He piled up 173 receptions for 3,292 yards and 32 touchdowns. He averaged at least 17.5 yards per catch every single year, which isn't a normal thing to do 3 years in a row at all. And he posted back-to-back seasons with 60-plus catches, 1,100-plus yards, and 11-plus touchdowns. So many of those yards came after the catch, when the play broke open and he was left in one-on-one space with the ball in his hands. The 2018 season put him on the map nationally. It came with Kyler Murray under center, the same Murray who won the Heisman that year and went to be the first overall pick the next spring. Ceedee caught 65 passes for 1,158 yards and 11 TDs that fall. and he did it while sharing a field with one of the most electric players in college football history. He was a steady hand on a team full of fireworks, the receiver who kept moving the chains while Murray broke the game with his legs. The Alabama playoff game that year, he had 8 catches for 109 yards and a score against the best corner in the sport in Pat Surtain. That was the moment a lot of scouts stopped treating him like a sidekick. His junior year in 2019 was the peak. He caught 62 passes for 1,327 yards and 14 touchdowns, while averaging 21.4 yards per reception. He was a consensus All-American and the Belinda-Koff Award finalist, the trophy they hand to the best receiver in the country. He even closed the year with 119 yards against LSU in the playoff semifinal. LSU would go on to win the national title that season, putting up those numbers against maybe the most talented corner in the past decade in Derek Stingley Jr. Pro Football Focus counted 26 broken tackles on him in 2019, the second most among all receivers in the country, and he averaged 11 yards after the catch, 5th best in the nation. 24% of his receiving yards came after contact, which is part that should make you pause, because that isn't supposed to happen with a 198-pound wideout. He even led the Big 12 in punt return average back in 2018 at 12.8 yards a return, because of course he did. That matters for the rest of this story. The frame that high school analysts had quietly questioned was already doing the work scouts would later doubt it could do. He was breaking tackles with it, winning contested catches with it, turning short passes into long ones. The body was never part of the problem in college, but the NFL doesn't scout on tape alone, and the next stop on this ride was a measuring tape and a stopwatch in Indianapolis, where numbers on a page would tell a different story than the film did. The 2020 NFL Combine is where things got complicated for Ceedee. He stood in at 6'1" and weighed 198 pounds while doing those 11 bench press reps. His 40-yard dash clocked in at 4.5 seconds, solid but not the burner time the fastest guys in the class posted. His vertical was 34.5 inches. None of those were bad numbers. They just weren't the numbers that make people forget about the lean build. And for some teams, that was enough to start looking at other options. His comparisons in the NFL helped him out a lot though. They're the reason he was in the conversation as potentially the first receiver off the board. He was a tackle-breaking machine in a way you don't typically see from his body type. And when he compared himself to DeAndre Hopkins and Devontae Adams at the Combine, the tape backed him up. There might not have been a better receiver in the class with the ball in his hands. People compared him to Hopkins for the subtle push-offs and physicality he used to create space and tight coverage. And that's high praise for a kid who hadn't played a single pro snap yet. The hands were some of the best in the entire draft. The ability to snag passes inside and outside his frame, above his eyes or below his hips, in traffic and in open space. The concerns that many had were specific and somewhat fair. The first was obviously the frame and the play strength, whether that lean build would hold up against physical NFL press man corners. Next came pure speed, because 4.5 seconds is good, but not great, and the class had guys with real track speed. Ruggs had blazing track speed and went off the board first because of it. That class was absolutely loaded, which made the doubt easier to act on. Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, and T. Higgins all came out together. And the debate at the top was Lamb versus Jeudy, two elite talents from powerhouse programs with different styles. Opinions were split down the middle, and when opinions split, the tiebreaker often becomes gut feeling. The smart projection at the time was that Lamb would start right away from the slot, where the alignment shields a receiver from press with a two-way go off the line and lets him work his magic in space. But he was about to show he was much more than just a slot receiver. Draft night in 2020 is where all the doubt played out on live TV. Ceedee was projected to go somewhere between like pick 8 and 12, but instead, he watched two receivers go ahead of him. Henry Ruggs went 12th overall to the Raiders, Jerry Jeudy went 15th to the Broncos, and Lamb was still sitting there as the third receiver taken in his own class. Then Dallas picked at 17, and the Cowboys never expected him to be available. They had him 6th on their entire board, and they passed on 3 separate trade down offers because they didn't want to risk losing him. Stephen Jones said afterwards they never ran a single mock draft that had Lamb falling to them at pick 17. Jerry Jones walked over and handed him the number 88 jersey, the same number Michael Irvin wore, which isn't a small thing in Dallas. Ceedee became the first Cowboys first-round receiver since Des Bryant in 2010. And it was a best player available pick even though the team had walked into the draft thinking defense after losing cornerback Byron Jones and pass rusher Robert Quinn in free agency. They even passed on an edge rusher Kayvon Chason to take him. Head coach Mike McCarthy called Lamb a playmaker who carried an alpha status and could line up at all 4 receiver positions, inside and out, and that flexibility is exactly what Dallas wanted. That wide receiver room was a perfect place for a skinny kid to show up and answer all the questions that were asked about him. Amari Cooper was the established wide receiver 1, signed to a 5-year, $100 million deal with $40 million guaranteed, a clean route technician and a 4-time Pro Bowler. Michael Gallup was also on the outside, coming off his own 1,000-yard season. Ceedee operated mostly from the slot as a rookie, the spot where his mismatch value lived, and he didn't have to be the guy on day one. His rookie year in 2020 was quietly excellent. He caught 74 passes for 935 yards and 5 touchdowns, and he set the Cowboys' rookie record for receptions along the way. The impressive part was that he kept producing after Dak Prescott went down in Week 5 with a season-ending ankle injury, catching passes from Andy Dalton for the rest of the time. The whole season went sideways after Dak got hurt, and a lot of rookies would have faded with their quarterback gone and the team reeling. Lamb didn't, and that told you something about who he already was. He was the one constant in a year that had none, and he did it at 21 years old in the middle of a brutal NFC East, and that was just his first year. In 2021, he took a clear step. He posted 79 catches for 1,102 yards and 6 touchdowns, earned his first Pro Bowl, and started to look like more than a number 2. By that year, he had quietly overtaken Gallup on the field, playing more snaps and catching more passes for more yards than the man ahead of him on the depth chart. He would start the season hot against Tampa with 104 yards, 7 catches, and a touchdown. His best game that season was a 9-reception, 149-yard, 2 TD game in an overtime win against the Patriots. The relationship between Amari and Ceedee was the quiet backbone of these 2 years. Cooper played the mentor, the established alpha who showed up every day and ran the route tree the right way. And Ceedee watched how a true wide receiver worked from the inside. Dallas was loaded at receiver, which meant that Lamb got to grow without the pressure of being the man just yet. And he used that time to steal the parts of Cooper's game that fit his own. By the end of 2021, the depth chart still showed Amari was the number 1, but the tape said something else. Ceedee was the one defenses were game planning for, the one that Dak was actually looking for when he needed a play, and the one whose numbers were climbing while Cooper's were sliding. The mentor had taught the student the route tree, and the student was already running it better than the teacher. The apprentice era was always going to end the day Dallas decided the student had passed the teacher. That decision was coming faster than anyone expected. But before we get to his breakout seasons, if you're enjoying this type of content, I'd appreciate it if you all subscribe. It lets YouTube and myself know that y'all are enjoying this type of content. Now let's get back into it. But before that, we have a quick word from our sponsor over at PrizePicks. The football preseason is officially here, and there's no better place to run your game than PrizePicks, America's #1 sports pick app. We've got star players on new teams and an incredible rookie class ready to take over as we get ready for the biggest football season yet. What I love about PrizePicks is that you don't have to just stick to week-to-week action. You can lock in full season picks right now on player projections. I already put together a 3-pick lineup that I'm locked into for the year. I have Justin Jefferson at more than 1,149.5 receiving yards, Jahmyr Gibbs at more than 1,199.5 rush yards, and Derrick Henry at more than 1,249.5 rushing yards as well. And the good news is building your lineup is super easy. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, submit your lineup, and follow your progress all year long right inside the app. Plus, PrizePicks is available in all 50 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $150 instantly in lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. Again, that's download the app today and use code CLNS to get $150 instantly in lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. And you know what? I'm going to say that actually one more time. That's $150 instantly in lineups if you win your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, America's #1 sports pick app. Now let's get back into it. March 2022 was when the keys changed hands. Dallas sent Amari Cooper to the Browns for a 2022 5th-round pick and a 6th-round pick. It mostly read like a salary dump. The message underneath the trade was clear, and Jerry Jones said the quiet part out loud a couple months later, telling reporters Lamb would be an upgrade over Cooper as a true #1 receiver in production, in the huddle, and off the field. Seems like a cheap shot, but whatever. The 2022 season was the takeover. Ceedee caught 107 passes for 1,359 yards and 9 touchdowns, all career highs at the time. While he answered the one real question that had followed him since the combine, whether he could beat outside coverage and not just work the slot. His best stretch came late that season. 7 receptions and 126 yards against the Jags in Week 15. 10 catches, 156 yards and 2 TDs against the Eagles the next week. And 11 catches with 100 yards to cap it off against the Titans. He lined up all over the formation, ran the full route tree, and the frame that scouts doubted held up fine against pressed corners. Once Dak Prescott returned from injury in Week 7, the Cowboys' offense climbed to #4 in the league in points per game. Ceedee was an engine of it all. The skinny kid was now the alpha, and the defense couldn't push him around the way pre-draft reports said they would. Then 2023 happened, and it was a complete masterclass. One of the best wide receiver seasons we've seen in NFL history. The Cowboys had the #1 scoring offense. Ceedee led the entire NFL with 135 receptions, the 6th most in a single season in the league history at that time. His 1,749 receiving yards and 12 receiving touchdowns came with 113 rushing yards and 2 rushing scores on top of it, because just catching the ball wasn't enough. On 181 targets, he caught 74.6% of them, averaged 102.9 yards per game, and moved the chains 87 times, the most in the league. He broke Michael Irvin's single-season franchise records for both receptions, the old mark was 111, and receiving yards, the old mark was 1,603. And he broke both of them in the same season while wearing Irvin's old number, 88. First team All-Pro honors came with it, and he finished third in Offensive Player of the Year voting. The history went deeper than the totals. He became the first player in NFL history to record at least 10 catches and 150 receiving yards in 3 consecutive games. The stretch saw him go 12 for 158 and 2 scores against the Rams, then 11 for 191 against the Eagles, then 11 for $151 and a touchdown against the Giants. His gloves and game towel from that run went to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in November of 2023. The week before the Rams game, he put up 117 yards against the Chargers. In that 4-game burst alone, he racked up 617 receiving yards, the most by a Cowboy in a 4-game span since at least 1970, beating a Mark Terrell Owens set back in 07. He crossed over 1,000 yards on the season in just 10 games, the fastest any Cowboy had done since Irvin himself in 1995. That made him the first player in franchise history with 3 1,000-yard receiving seasons in his first 4 years. It also tied him with Dez Bryant, T.O., and Tony Hill for third most 1,000-yard seasons in team history, except Lamb did it before his 25th birthday, while those other guys took a lot longer to get there. The Week 17 matchup against the Lions is the one that everyone remembers for multiple different reasons. With the record sitting right there, Lamb would finish with 13 catches for 227 yards and a touchdown. He passed Irvin live on the field, breaking the single-game franchise marks for catches and yards in the same night he took the season records. Dak Prescott, his quarterback, called it one of the hungriest mindsets I've ever been around in the game of football, and said Lamb makes his job easy. The mindset the whole year is worth pausing on. Ceedee earlier in 2023 said, "I'm there, I'll show you." And that came after a 42-10 loss to the 49ers earlier in that year, where he publicly called out the offense for lacking an identity. Dallas found its identity real fast after that, and it was simple: throw the ball to Ceedee as often as possible. By midseason, he was telling anyone who would listen, "I'm the top receiver in this game, and there's no question about it." He wasn't bragging. He was keeping a receipt, and the receipt kept printing every Sunday. The plan was to get the ball to 88 and let him do the rest. Mike McCarthy spent the year moving Lamb all over the formation to keep defenses from getting a beat on him. Ceedee himself said it had become Mike versus the DC at that point, which tells you exactly how much of the game ran through him. This is where the through line of the whole story lands. The lean frame that was supposed to limit him became the thing that let him run through arm tackles and turn short passes into record-breaking ones. He beat the press coverage he barely saw in college. He beat the doubles that came once he got hot. And he beat the cloud looks teams threw at him on third down, all with the same body the combine said was too light. The doubt was wrong. And the 2023 season was the proof, printed in Irvin's own number. A season like that doesn't just break records, it sets a price, and Dallas was about to have to pay it. The holdout came first. Ceedee stayed away from OTAs and all of preseason, trying to force Dallas back to the table to sign a new deal. Jerry Jones told reporters in early August he didn't have any urgency to get the deal done, and Lamb fired back with a short digital laugh on social media, a response that said more than a paragraph would've. It got tense enough to make a fan base nervous with week 1 creeping closer, and the whole league was watching to see who blinked first. Then on August 26, 2024, it got done. 4 years, $136 million with $100 million guaranteed and a $38 million signing bonus that was a wide receiver record at the time. The deal made him $34 million per year, second only to Justin Jefferson's $35 million, and it ended the holdout about a week before the season started. Stephen Jones had said all along there was zero thought of Lamb not being a Dallas Cowboy, and Dak Prescott had told Ceedee flat out that he would get his money. Dak got his most important weapon back just in time for the opener against Cleveland. The 2024 season backed up the money. Lamb caught 101 passes for 1,194 yards and 6 touchdowns, while making another All-Pro second team, despite real turbulence on the Cowboys' offensive line and in the backfield. Coverages doubled him more than ever, cloud looks on third downs, and he still produced. His paycheck didn't change the way he played, and the production didn't fall off, and that's exactly what actually matters when a guy cashes in. The Cowboys receivers coach, Robert Prince, admitted that year that teams were doing a better job of finding 88 and doubling him, and Lamb still found a way to beat it, because that's what the top guys do. Then 2025 was a year things probably went the worst for him since starting. He even battled through a rough opener with a couple of costly drops against the Eagles and answered the next week instead of letting it snowball. That's the same maturity he had shown since he was a rookie catching balls from a backup QB. But the frame finally cost him some games. Lamb suffered a high ankle sprain against the Bears in week 3 and the injury sidelined him through week 6. That added up to a career low 14 games, the fewest of his NFL life. The numbers that follow tell a more interesting story than the box score does. He caught 75 passes for 1,077 yards with a career high 14.4 yards per catch and a career low 3 touchdowns. Running the fewest routes of his career, he saw the second fewest targets and caught the second fewest balls, and still cleared 1,000 yards for the 5th straight season. That 5th straight 1,000-yard year meant something. It put him alongside Michael Irvin as the only Cowboys receivers ever to do it 5 times in a row. His 571 receptions and 7,416 yards through 6 seasons are the most in franchise history over that span, ahead of Irvin's pace. And he already sits second on the team's all-time 100-yard games list with 27, trailing only Irvin, who has 47. Even with the lowest touchdown total of his life, the baseline didn't move. And that's what separates the great receivers from the good ones. The George Pickens trade is where the story turns forward. Dallas had traded for Pickens back in May of 2025 to give Ceedee the explosive number 2 the offense was desperately needing, and it opened up everything immediately. With George drawing deep attention, Lamb's deep route percentage jumped to a career high 19.7%. He hauled in 12 deep receptions and both of them made the Pro Bowl together. The quiet part is the role reversal. A kid who spent 2 years learning behind Amari Cooper became the veteran teaching Pickens how to be a pro, the same way Cooper once taught him. The apprentice became the mentor and the cycle started over. Now Ceedee is heading into 2026 saying him and George Pickens can be the best duo ever, which is a wild thing to say out loud until you remember the guy saying it has backed up every other wild thing he's ever said. To actually be the best, they would have to clear names like Randy Moss and Chris Carter, Larry Fitz and Anquan Bolden, or Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt, which is a ridiculous standard to hold pair in its second year together too. But Ceedee has spent his whole career clearing standards people said were too high for him. The numbers scouts pointed to was 198 pounds. That same number is what turned Doubt into a $136 million career. And it's still the thing nobody in this league has figured out how to stop. So there you have it. Watch this next video if you haven't already and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching.